Hey, welcome to the Road and Morale podcast. So do you ever feel like screaming out in the office, on Zoom or outside the school gates? For the love of God, come on, really? And if this is you and you're looking for an honest, fun and frank podcast on life and business, then sit back and listen to me, Road and Morale. I'll be bringing great people on the show to talk, share and debate their life experiences and business challenges, keeping the show unpolished, but in a fun and unique British style, with sarcasm, tenacity, and maybe a few swear words or tears. This podcast keeps it real, honest, raw, and removes the bullshit in the only way I know how, through authenticity and getting shit done. Think of it less like the Housewives of New York or Towie with the lipo and drama, and more like the House and Lives of the real world. I hope you'll take something away to be better informed, laugh, smile, or maybe even finally getting the confidence to shout, come on really. So enjoy. Hi Jill and Edwina, it's an absolute pleasure to have you both on the Rain and Morale podcast. How are you both?
Very well, great, thank you. Yes, it's great to be here.
Amazing. So for the listeners, Jill and Edwina are both currently based in Sydney, Australia, somewhere that I've been and have a mad passion about. And I am really intrigued and excited about this podcast today, but in a brief introduction to you both. Firstly, Jill. Jill has been a consultant for over 25 years. Her background is a chartered accountant and taxation specialist, which clearly scares the hell out of me, but has an MBA and a master's in environmental science. However, Jill currently at the moment is the strategy and innovation advisor to the Ocean Nourishment Corporation. And everyone's going, what the hell is that? And we'll come on to that in a moment. Also the director at the crowdfunding platform ReadyFundGo, amongst many other things. But I do want to dive into the topic. So welcome, Jill. And then secondly to Edwina, delighted to have you. So Edwina, Dr. Edwina Tanner, I should say, is the project manager at WhaleX, also at the Ocean Nourishment Corporation. Also a project manager at World Harbour at the Sydney Institute and a lecturer. And I know that your specialist science is in climate science, so a lot of focus on carbon emissions, budgets, and all of the world of phytoplanktons and all of that we're going to come on that completely blows my mind. Anyway, welcome to you both. I hope I've done you justice. To the session.
Fantastic. Great to be here.
Oh no, it's an absolute pleasure. So listen, I really would love to firstly start with, tell me a little bit more about the Ocean Nourishment Corporation, maybe if one of you want to pick that up, and then a little bit more about the WhaleX project.
Okay, I will start with the Ocean Nourishment Corporation, which was founded in 2004, so a long time ago. And it grew out of a concept from the University of Sydney, which was from Ian Jones' Ocean Technology Lab. And the concept is that phytoplankton are tiny creatures that play a huge role in moderating the climate of the planet. So his concept is that if we could grow more phytoplankton, we could draw down more CO2, but in doing so, we could also grow more fisheries because phytoplankton are the base of the food chain and they feed every creature up through the marine cycle, even up to whales. So that phytoplankton feed the zooplankton, feed the fish, feed the shark, and ultimately whales. So this concept is really, starting very small, looking at bottle experiments and seeding them with nutrients and looking at phytoplankton grow, and then moving this into the real world and then looking at the reaction from, drawing down CO2 and how the fisheries react as well. So great concept. And the idea of Ocean Nourishment Corporation is to do the science and to put a business strategy around this, to bring it into the real world and to make it happen. So take it out of the experimental domain and let's get this really working.
And what I love about that is actually the simplicity of it. I know in a moment we're going to go into the complexities of it in terms of science and data and management, etc. But it really is, and it reminds me a little bit about, you know, the ants and the workers, the millions of those tiny, what may seem insignificant, right through up to these huge ocean dwelling animals that it's just, without them we all fail. So I absolutely love the simplicity of it. So thank you for that. And Jill, WhaleX itself as a project, how does that form out of that into what you guys are doing?
Yeah, well, WhaleX, we put together the WhaleX team for the Elon Musk Carbon Removal Prize, and we were really delighted because we got into the top 60 teams worldwide, and we're the #1 ocean team in Australia. So it's been a fantastic journey, and it's still got another 3 years to go. So as part of the prize, you have to, it takes you through a roadmap, essentially, of different experiments and different milestones you have to meet. And it's a fantastic process. So we've been working through that, and we're sort of 1 year in, and we're now working towards the next experiment. So it's yeah, we've got a team of 12 of us, and everybody's got different skills, and we're working, you know, working together to get through that. But it's a really fantastic process.
So tell me, when you first heard that Elon Musk was obviously going to do this kind of, well, sort of project, whose idea was it to go, we have to get involved here, we've got to submit something?
I think it was mine. Yeah, it was a way to really get what we're doing verified, and sort of public acknowledgement of what we're doing. So Ocean Nourishment has sort of been a little bit of in the wild frontier of science for a long time. Okay, so you know, the words of ocean engineering and geoengineering and fertilization and all of these concepts have been swirling around for a long time, but they haven't been proven. So we really want to put this in the mainstream, and to do that, what's fantastic about the X Prize is that the science and the projects that you put in are verified by they're really basically peer reviewed by experts around the world. And this is really important to us, to put it out there, let people look at what we're doing, and look at the numbers, look at the figures, look at what's happening, and get that feedback. So yeah.
Kudos for you for putting it through, and clearly you got through. How long did it take to pull everything together, and then what was that feeling like when you knew you were one of the winners?
Took us the first year to put the WhaleX team together and to get all the documentation submitted. And Jill here was very, very instrumental in getting all the numbers aligned, so getting all the accounting done, and getting it, you know, to look, all the spreadsheets filled out. So this was really important. And then we had another team, some engineers who, you know, we went out and did an on-site experiment, you know, to look at buoyancy. And we also have a satellite person who Pixelytics, who actually developed a model to measure or to calculate the amount of carbon we're sequestering. And so all these pieces had to kind of fit together into the one space. And it's yeah, so 1 year, and now we're another half year in and raising funds to get the next stage of the experimentation in the water.
Amazing. It's a shame we can't just, if Elon's listening, you know, they're raising funds.
Yeah, we thought you had a direct line to him. That's what you told us, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'll give him a call later. I'll drop him a text or WhatsApp maybe, or a Telegram. There's so many different platforms, but yeah, come on, guys.
Exactly.
So Jill, I guess listening to that for so long, there's been so many incredible people in science, data, technology that have known all of this, but often the translation to every day has become a challenge. So this has given you that platform for scale, I guess.
Yeah, no, it has. And I think one of the important things to put into context is, as Edwina said at the beginning, in terms of this idea, it's been worked on for a long time. So 2004, when Professor Ian Jones was starting to look at it, and he spent years going around the world talking to people about it. Actually, in 2009, the Royal Society brought out a report on geoengineering, and Ian was mentioned in that with the idea. And it was really interesting because in 2009, people were talking about these technologies then. But in 2009, they were saying these technologies were the ideas of last resort. And it's so interesting to look at it now, just over 10 years later. And now everybody is really wanting to know everything about these ideas. What's the latest solution? Can we do it now? And for years, people, Edwina as well, with Ian, have been working all this time, trying to get interest and traction. But what's happened is sort of we're working effectively on the supply side of the market, so the ocean carbon market. But actually, it's only recently the demand side has been there. So if you think it's only really in the last couple of years that a lot of large corporates and governments have come out and said, well, we're going to go to net zero by 2030 or 2050. And until we had that, then we didn't really have the demand in the market. So people were working on these technologies for the good of the planet. But how are they going to be commercialized? But now there's a really huge opportunity, and now is the time for people to invest in these technologies, because the demand side is there, and people are going to need to be buying credits to offset some of their emissions where they can't decarbonize their supply chains.
And I'd love to talk about that a little bit more, because I think it's a shame that we have to have a commercialized opportunity for anyone to want to do it, but that's real life, and we all know that. But unlike what I'd like to maybe discuss a little bit is, obviously when people think about carbon credits, they think of forests, they think of planting trees, or maybe even now with the peatlands, etc. But there's also that challenge at the moment that we're buying our carbon credits, and maybe an entire forest, an ecosystem is burnt down, and those carbon credits have suddenly disappeared. How can the waters and oceans have a more, I guess, secure, safer carbon market? Because it feels very untrustworthy at the moment, if I'm honest.
It's a brilliant question. I don't know, Edwina, do you want to talk about the sequestration?
I guess just to start off, we'll look at, the oceans are 70% of the planet, and the coasts are 2% of the oceans. So really, if we're going to have a solution to draw down carbon and to mitigate carbon, we have to use the ocean, and we have to use a large ocean scale. We know from looking at the cliffs of Dover, for example, the ocean sequester carbon, and they sequester it for thousands of years durably. So we know all this. It happens. The science is there, the understanding is there, but the measurements are really difficult to do. And so this is where we're at now, is that we know that the other side of the science is that we're just beginning to understand how whales come into the picture. So over the last century, we've taken out 3 million whales from our ecosystem. It's horrific. And they're slowly coming back. And people say whale numbers are coming back, but they're coming back in thousands or tens of thousands, or in some cases in, not even those numbers. So we really are a very long way from replacing the whales we have extracted from the ecosystem. In 2010, some very interesting research by Roman indicated that whales and whale poo, that we're going to talk about, for example, actually
I love that.
stimulate the ecosystem and are a very, very important part of the global climate cycle. And that whales have a great role to play in moderating the climate, so in drawing down CO2 and in sequestering it, even through their carcasses as they sink, or the phytoplankton and zooplankton as they sink to the bottom of the ocean. So there's now a lot more knowledge about how all of these systems interact. And the International Monetary Fund has even cottoned onto this and given a value for each whale as $2 million for their ecosystem services to the planet, and in sequestering carbon dioxide and creating fisheries. So we're beginning to put the pieces together. And I think it's that understanding, that valuation that we have of the creatures in the system and all the little parts of the system that are very important. But we do know, and there is evidence of this durable sequestration in the ocean systems. So this translates to deep blue carbon bonds, which is what, Jill might be, happy to talk about.
Yeah, and I guess that's an interesting concept, because I know they've now started to put numbers and figures on things like elephants. And, you know, again, it's a shame we've got to put a price tag on, you know, these things. But I guess if you were to total the number of whales and sharks that have been depleted from the oceans, it really is, you know, extremely shocking. I watched Racing to Extinction recently on Water Bear, and they did quite a bit there on the ocean. So yeah, I think, you know, again, keeping it simple, we've got these huge majestic animals that secrete, as all animals do, and yet as this powerful, you know, making money out of old rope or making money out of poo. I mean, this is just incredible, and yet so simple. So Jill, tell me a little bit more about the kind of blue carbon sequestration. How is it working, and how do we drive confidence into the market that it's a reliable source, and we can continue to grow it?
Well, it's difficult, because it's very early days. But as Edwina has said, in terms of, and you made the point very well at the beginning, in terms of forest burning. So we need to be looking at the deep ocean, because in terms of the demand for carbon credits, we're not going to be able to supply the demand. So we need to start looking at the deep ocean. In a way, the deep ocean is the natural place to look. And as Edwina said, it's 70% of the surface of the Earth. It's the largest carbon sink already. So doing things to adjust that makes sense to increase the sequestration. We're already looking at sort of blue carbon, and a lot of people around the world are now starting to sort of measure that and look at mangroves. So that's a starting point. But then the deep ocean is really the bit that there's people who are looking at different ideas and different solutions, but it's all quite early stage in terms of needing to do more around the measurement, so that we can actually verify what has been sequestered. How can we audit it? How can we ensure there's no double counting? You know, how can it be tracked? And with the oceans, it's much more complicated, because, and then who owns things as well, because you know what are the rights, etc. So it is complicated, but people are starting now to look at it. And we've seen over the last couple of years, when people start to pay attention and focus on it, and there is a monetary value, then all of a sudden, as you say, it's a shame there has to be that, but then people do start to get very interested, and things start to move. And I think in terms of the sort of integrity in general, there's been more you know, discussions about it, and how we can create the right modules. And the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market, they've brought out a paper to, and they're getting feedback on that. So I think all of these things, I think for each of the different offsets, integrity and how to you know, measure and how to verify and get confidence in the market is really important. Because if you're the CEO of a big organization, and you're decarbonising your supply chain, but then you need to buy some offsets, you want to make sure that those offsets have permanence, so that's what some of the ocean credits are going to have. But you need to make sure they can be validated, and you know, that something's definitely happened, and you can see what's happening. So there is a way to go on that. We're starting to work on it, but yes, that's still part of the work in progress.
Actually, something you mentioned about the forest burning down, you know, and those carbon credits going. Well, interestingly enough, we had some very large bushfires in Australia, and what happened with all of the ash from the bushfires is it ended up over the ocean and stimulated a lot of phytoplankton growth. And so that carbon ended up in the bottom of the ocean and being sequestered there. So there's this whole link, and that's where the carbon ends up eventually.
I think that's the reality, is that it's so interconnected, isn't it? The whole life cycle of humans and animals, etc. So I think, for me, what worries me, I guess, about the oceans is, are we at risk in any way of damaging the oceans? Are we at risk of people exploring? Because I genuinely believe that water will be the next gold, diamonds fought over globally. Like, are we at risk of destroying the ocean more, especially the deep ocean, if we start to explore? Like, I'm quite scared about that.
Yeah, and I think, Rena, a lot of people are, and you know, we are really our team are really passionate about the environment and conservation. We're all really keen to make sure that when we're working, we do the right thing and we don't cause damage, and that if we're looking at the combination of the solutions, that we're doing it marginally to make sure we're not causing damage. But we've got to sort of take into account that there's lots of people around the world will be trying lots of different things. So the International Maritime Organization, they're starting to look at what they can do in terms of the laws of the seas, etc. So there needs to be regulation. It needs to be from governments. There's a lot of work to do in terms of controlling what can and can't be done in different waters. I don't know, Edwina, if you want to say more about the sort of potential sort of issues and how we're dealing with them. And
yeah, I think unfortunately we've already damaged a lot of ecosystems and habitats, and by taking the whales out of the system, we have done a lot of damage to the nutrient cycle and the carbon cycle of the planet. So we kind of look at this as a restoration effort, and what we're trying to do is really replace these lost nutrients and regrow these ecosystems and stimulate this growth. So we're looking at a 1% increase, a very light touch over a large area. And so by doing that, you're working in a safe space. So the work we're doing is working in this safe space that we're not going to cause these massive blooms and oxygen depletion and all of these happening. That can happen, and you see in our coastal ecosystems. So when you get the agricultural runoff and you get huge influxes of nutrients, and you get this massive outcrops of seaweed growth that smother marine life, and all of these things that can happen and do happen in coastal zones by huge, massive influxes of nutrients into a very small area. They cannot cope with it. So we're looking at distributing this effect over a very large area, and basically having that light touch of just kind of increasing the marine snow, like whales do, and taking the lessons from them. They've been doing this for 40 million years. This technique's been going for 40 million years, and they haven't stuffed it up. Unfortunately, we have.
If it's not, let's not try and change something that's clearly working very well. But that's an interesting point, because actually you mentioned earlier sort of 2% of coastals, and we're all aware of the nitrogen, the fertilizers, all of that runoff. Interesting fact there about the trees running off the ash into the oceans. Wasn't aware of the benefit of that. So that's amazing. So I get it now. So you're really focusing on the bigger part of the oceans. So let's bring it back down to whale poo. Let's get into how are you going to take that thing that's been working for 40 million years? And am I right in saying you can recreate this whale poo, the fake whale poo, if you like, to stimulate from the bottom up?
Yeah,
I didn't mean that.
We call it simulated whale poo, and we've termed it aquafood. So the idea is that we have measurements. People have gone out and collected this substance, and it has been analysed from various numbers of whales at various points in the ocean. And it's not always the same substance. It depends on a whale's diet as to what they are pooing out, of course. And so what we have, though, is a theme that whales actually, depending on what they eat and where they are in the ocean, they poo out the nutrients that are required by phytoplankton at the bottom of the food chain to continue that growth. So nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, trace elements. So these are in different quantities, in different ratios. So basically, when you analyze whale poo, these are the substances it breaks down to. So to sort of simulate the whale poo, we've got real whale poo, and we know what that's made of. And then we actually measure the contents of the seawater in an area that we're going to put this simulated whale poo in, and look at what the missing nutrients are. So the limiting nutrients for phytoplankton to grow. And so we match those two up, and we come up with a formula that we then put into the ocean in that area, which is slightly different depending on the area you're in. Southern ocean, you require a lot more iron. Tropical zones, you require a lot more nitrogen. So phosphorus is limiting in certain areas. So we analyze all this. We have the data. There's large global data sets that can tell you when we do our own in situ measurements. And then we've come up with this formula that needs to that will replace these, and that will be used very quickly by the phytoplankton to create to draw down the carbon, create food at the bottom of the food chain, be eaten. And, yeah, this is how it works. And then we monitor all of this activity.
So this is just me and my brain. So technically, you could take large sections of the ocean globally and drop tons of your special formula that's required for different oceans and different, whether it's iron, phosphorus, nitrogen. Could this ever be massively scaled up? You know, I'm envisaging, you know, planes dropping in, you know, this ingredients. Could that ever happen?
This is what we're investigating through WhaleX and the X Prize. Is that the goal of the prize is to draw down a gigaton of CO2 and to show that you can do it safely in the manner that we're doing it. So I'll let Jill talk about the numbers.
Well, we probably wouldn't want to drop it in one big dump like that. But effectively, what we're looking at is maybe repurposing offshore rigs and working a solution to manage, go into the ocean at a certain a certain level, so that we manage it very carefully and in a controlled way, but effectively, and also whether we can actually make the solution at sea, or whether we're using ships as well. So yeah, it's quite exciting in terms of looking at how we'll be doing it, and using green hydrogen, etc. as well. So it's yeah, there's a lot to it, a lot involved in terms of setting up the process.
Yeah, because I suppose from a distribution point of view, like you say, rigs, offshore wind farms, shipping, etc. There's plenty of ways that you could get it at scale out into. I mean, I'm just, I'm crazy. I'm thinking, let's just,
Well, what you've said is this is exactly what happened with the bushfires. So the ash and that fell in, it happens all the time off the Saharan desert. So the dust from the Saharan desert actually ends up in the ocean and stimulates this whole process, upwelling region. So this already happens in very on a big way, in a big scale, and is very productive. These are the most productive regions of the oceans, the upwelling, the dust areas where you get these nutrients put into the ocean. So it's being done, nature's doing it, and the amount of nutrients that whales move around is massive. So this is already being done on a big scale, but it's how do we recreate it in the right way? Because we've done a lot of things to the planet that haven't been done in the right way, and we really need to start doing it smarter and better, and not being driven solely by profit.
Yeah, and I guess the challenge we're always going to have with all of these amazing initiatives globally is, when you look at the oceans, like you said earlier, the political issues, the governmental issues, who owns what, fishing, and again, when you look at things like Seaspiracy, or you look at how we fish our oceans and we dredge the bottom, we're always going to be fighting that consumer demand and world demand for food. So what you don't want to do is get to the point where you can achieve what you achieve, but all you're really doing is topping up, and stopping destruction. But that's me being negative, so apologies. But those are obviously battles that we're going to have. So help me understand then, for the next, up to the point where you've got this sort of 4-year project, fast forward to 4 years, what happens in 4 years with WhaleX? What's the ambition?
Well, the concept of WhaleX is to set up kind of a working site for ocean nourishment. So the idea is that we'd have a platform that is producing this aquafood sustainably, using this renewable energy and this hydrogen source on site, that we would be putting it into the ocean through spurts, through injecting it at particular levels that we've measured, that this will be a continuous process, that we might have ships that come and fill up with this aquafood and take them on certain courses. So the idea is to set up the system, the process, to have the satellite measurements and the monitoring system in tow as well. So we're planning this little robotic whale, we call it, but it's our sentinel. So it's going to have all the sensors on it that will measure the carbon flux and to make sure that the ecosystem is being maintained and growing in the way that it's supposed to. So the idea of WhaleX is to set up that site and to set up that concept and to have it measured and verified.
And so please tell me this robotic whale is going to have a name.
We thought we'd have a competition. If you've got good ideas, please. Yeah, we thought we'd have a competition. Yeah. So
no, but in all seriousness, when it comes to just translating it and making it, you know, en masses and kind of creating the hearts and minds, I think, yeah, I can imagine being able to watch and follow and report where it's been and having a name, giving it this, you know, persona, I think would be amazing.
Yeah, no, you're quite right. So yeah, we will let you know when we open the competition.
No, seriously, please do when you do that, and obviously I'll share. I'll put in Rona just to start with. You know, you can give that.
Yes, right, okay.
So you'd have people targeting it to shoot it down. So you know, definitely don't call it Rona.
I was going to say, next time I'm expecting you to be wearing a shirt, Rona, without the birds on, with the whales on.
No, do you know what? I did actually look in my wardrobe this morning, and I've got skulls, I've got tigers, I've got birds, I've got all sorts of animals. It's like, oh God, I've got no fish, no whales. But then I thought that's probably a bit too cheesy. But anyway, sorry, I know it's a very serious, very, very serious topic, but I think part and parcel of getting the story across is kind of making it real. So are there a couple of things that you'd really like to get across today in terms of the importance of what you're doing, what you might need? Obviously always funding and of course money, but what are the key messages about the projects and the mission would you like to get across today?
I'll say one thing that's a bit more general than just for WhaleX, and I'll let Edwina say more about WhaleX, but just in general. So we're working on one of the solutions for carbon sequestration in the ocean, and there's a number of other people working on other solutions. And I think everybody's in the same boat, as it were, at one level, in terms of everybody needs to do further research, they need further investment. And there is some risk. So you made a very good point saying, you know, you're worried about the deep ocean, what might happen. Lots of the deep ocean is barren. But one of the things that I think it's really important people start to understand the concept of risk, and that actually there is a risk by trying anything new, any new technology. There's a risk about doing old things. But actually, there's a bigger risk today by doing nothing than doing something. So this year, we hit the highest level, the record of carbon emitted of 422 parts per million. And every day, every moment of the day, when we do nothing, we're emitting more carbon into the atmosphere, and the risk is getting greater by the minute. So, you know, when I said back in 2009, the Royal Society report was saying, you know, some of these different ideas like this and other solutions similar are, you know, ideas of last resort. We really need to get the research done. Some of them will work and some of them won't, but we need to get all the research done. We need to get in the oceans, making sure they're safe, working out how to measure. But saying no to trying these things is really no longer an option. So no. I think it's important to sort of put it into context about how we look at risk and understand risk.
I think that's a key. Sorry, go on.
So, well, I think the concept and what they state on the page of the X Prize is that before any scientific breakthrough, it's thought of as a high risk or a nonsensical idea. So this has happened all through history. We have all these moments in time where if we hadn't tried things, we wouldn't be where we are today. And we really are not going to find a magic bullet for the climate. There are many things that we need to do to actually get the climate where we need it, to get the temperatures down, to undo what we've done. And so it is decarbonizing, but it's also looking at these bigger solutions, these technologies, and replacing some of the things that we've taken out of the system, and looking at it seriously and not as a bogus thing. It's also looking at our natural systems and how they are doing things and how we need to learn from those natural systems and how they've been working so well. Mother Earth is very resilient and, can fix a lot of our issues, but we need to look and work better with it.
And I love that, because I think that the reality is, like you say, if 70% of the world is covered by oceans, and you guys and maybe 50 other people all doing their own different thing, just touch on 10% of that, and 20% works and the others doesn't. None of you are going out intentionally to do anything that would harm or create something that isn't already in that ecosystem from millions of years of the planet working without us. And what we've done in the last 150 years through not necessarily arrogance, it's all been about, growth, prosperity and whatever, and there's still a huge part of the population that deserves the right to healthcare, education, be able to live off more than $1 a day. So there's still work to be done there. But I think, like you say, I worked in innovation for years and, got known as the kill queen. There was some things that were just brilliant and there was others who were like, but you've got to give it a go, haven't you?
Yeah. Don't discount before you've actually done the science and the measurements. And I think this is the report came out in 2009 that said ocean nourishment was not a good solution. But what the report actually said is the experiments haven't been done, and we need to look at that more before we can really say that. So people actually do form ideas and concepts. And I've talked to a lot of young people about this concept, and generally, when you start talking to them about putting nutrients into the ocean, they start thinking about the algal blooms, and they start thinking about coastal zones and all of these things that have gone wrong. But when you start talking about the deeper oceans and the phytoplankton and what whales do, the light bulb starts going on and going, oh, okay, yes, and you look at marine sediments and how massive they are. This is a natural process. So it's that you do actually start seeing people to understand after a while. So it's really getting that knowledge across and talking to people about it, and doing things in the right way is very important.
It's a bit like, if we could understand that by pumping in fertilizers and chemicals and the water that runs off and sewage. I mean, oh my God, recently the reports around the UK on 377 points in the UK. That literally makes me feel sick. I can't believe we pay these people to deal with this stuff. We allow, anyway, don't let me rant on about that. But the point is, if we can understand by putting in rubbish into the ocean, it creates rubbish. It is common sense to go, well, if we fill it with nutrients and health, just like we take our own, kind of nutrients that we put into our own body, it's going to have a positive impact.
Yeah, that's exactly the message.
Yeah. It's very, very good analogy. Yeah.
Great. I think I'm definitely getting it now. But
maybe I was going to say, maybe it's going to be called Rona after this.
Although, the way I'm going with my weight, I think probably the analogy of a whale is probably quite appropriate. So let's look then. We've still got a little bit more time, so I'm just going to sort of another 5 minutes. In the next couple of years, how confident are you that at the end of this, we're going to have the transparency, the data, and the confidence, the integrity to know that this is a solution?
I think this is what the X Prize has actually provided the platform for us to do. So it has set up that side of the equation, which is to verify what we're doing. We cannot submit any data that hasn't been verified. Any carbon that we say is being sequestered has to be measured, not just modeled. So we have to measure it, and we then can ground truth our models through these measurements. So we're going through each step and we're scaling up as we go. So we did a very small scale experiment, 200 litres of this aquafood, looking at buoyancy. So our next step is to do a 2,000 litre mesocosm experiment. And that's to look at the different nutrient mixes that we're trialing, and to see which one of those grows best. And all along the way, we're developing our models, we're developing our monitoring, and all of this data gets submitted to X Prize, and then they have the top scientists throughout the world who are actually verifying all of the results that are being submitted. So this is a fantastic platform. That's why it's been such a good journey for us. We've already got our first report back, and 3 referees, and they also looked at our spreadsheets that we put in that looked at the numbers and the amount of carbon we were sequestering for our first 1-ton experiment, and came up actually, which was quite good, with a higher number of carbon sequestered than we came up with. Not a lot, but it was very encouraging. So by going through the processes, it's really putting our experimentation and our data and everything through a rigorous process, which is what science is and science does. So this is very encouraging.
I guess actually as a community of people doing different things, the brilliance of that is the failure of some of these things provides the data and the knowledge, and then the success of others, and then it's you build and take and learn from each other. And I think that's what I love about science. Although it can be competitive, I think the reality is of how it, you know, combines together to help each other is incredible.
It also reminds me of James Dyson, just in terms of always remember reading about him when he made this first vacuum, in terms of, he said that he had I think it was about 5,400 attempts before he finally got to what he wanted. So yeah, these things do take time to work through and experiment and get to the next level. So
and how involved is Elon's team in terms of the process over the years, or is it very much you kind of crack on, and then is there much involvement from his team? Or
yeah, no, they've been fantastic. We've got there's been a lot of feedback and a lot of energy put into connecting us all together, and this is a really important aspect of this whole thing. It's not one of us is going to do this. We need to find all the people who have all the little pieces of the puzzle that we need, and the expertise. I mean, we've started with a great team with a lot of diversity, but there's other things that we need to add to that to really make a success of what we're doing. So that here's what the X Prize has done is really made it possible to get some of those connections and get us all talking to each other. Maybe some of the solutions will work better, together. We're looking at the ocean alkalinity. Maybe some of that olivine put into our aquafood might have a bigger effect. So we're looking at all of these things. That the iron people, we're not just looking at iron in the ocean, we're looking at other nutrient mixes, and I think we're learning from each other. I think they've termed what they're doing, also relating it back to whales and what they do. So we're really learning from each other, and I think the X Prize has created this space where we're all being put on the world stage and looking at what each other is doing, and perhaps how we can connect maybe with some of the seaweed people as well. So it's fabulous. I think they've really been good. They're going to do some videos of the top 10. They've picked 10 teams and we're one of them, so that's going to be exciting. And speaking of video and publicity, science is expensive, so we need this publicity. To make a blockbuster movie is $100 million. This is the sort of money that we need to actually get these ideas actually off the ground and working. So, Don't Look Up, what did that do? Entertained millions of people on the planet. But we're really, what we're doing is a Don't Look Up solution that will work for the planet. And we need that kind of funding to really make it work. And I think we've got a great story to tell. So
it's amazing. We need a Don't Look Down now, don't we? In terms of for the oceans. But well, listen, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. There's so much more about geoengineering and just the simplicity of it that I could talk to all day. Maybe we'll touch base again, I think, in a couple of years and see how the project's going on. But I think the publicity, education, knowledge, connectivity, all of those things, and then making it, it's not when it's translating that, isn't it, into everyday understanding. So I can't thank you enough for your time, for both of you today. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and I've learned so much. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Rona. It's been great.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, you're welcome, and we will definitely catch up again soon. Thank you.
Thanks.
So that's it. You've made it. The show's over. Thank you for being with us. I hope you've been able to take something away, maybe solve a problem, or just know you're not alone. Here's hoping it made you smile with a few laughs along the way. Please feel free to find me on all social media channels, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search the Road and Morale podcast. Have an awesome day and see you next time.